Good morning and welcome to Rising. Jess, happy Friday. It's good to be back.
We're back. We're matching. It's Friday. Things are good, Amber.
Yes, they are.
Well, let's get into it. After a growing chorus from all sides, politicians and media, Vice President Kamala Harris to step up her presence in the media. Her much anticipated first interview finally aired last night. Tim Walz was there too, and in a sit down with CNN's Dana Bash, Harris touched on her plan called the Opportunity Economy. Take a listen.
Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it, which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging, what we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years.
Now, when asked about her change of heart on fracking, this is how she put it.
My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking. In fact, Dana, I cast the tie-breaking vote that actually increased leases for fracking as vice president.
Bash brought up her 2019 stance on immigration as well.
Just one other question about something that you said in 2019 when you first ran. There was a debate. You raised your hand when asked whether or not the border should be decriminalized. Do you still believe that?
I believe there should be consequence. We have laws that have to be followed and enforced that address and deal with people who cross our border illegally, and there should be consequences.
But of note, Harris shied away from race and gender, seeming to play down the historic nature of being the first Black and Asian female nominee. And when asked about rival Donald Trump's July comments that she appeared to have turned Black, this is what she said.
He suggested that you happened to turn Black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
So, Jess, I actually thought that was a good answer. When you're going into a war of words with Trump, it usually doesn't end well for the person who decides to engage in it. That was probably the best answer she could have given there. The rest of them, I thought, left a lot to be desired, especially when she was pressed on her policy changes, which are pretty significant from 2019 to 2024. She tried to say that her values had stayed the same, yet didn't explain how those same values led to a radically different position on policy and different policy outcomes. And she didn't explain how she got from believing that illegal immigration should be decriminalized, comparing ICE to the KKK, to now believing that we should enforce the law at the southern border, or how she went from believing that there should be an outright ban on fracking to, as a member of the Biden administration, being supportive of fracking. There just was not the connection made of how someone who was a seasoned veteran politician at the point when she was running in the Democratic primary in 2019 for the 2020 nomination, to then in 2020, even when she was running with Biden as his vice president, and then now in 2024, how does someone who has been in politics that long suddenly undergo this radical change?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see this change as that radical. I think, her position on fracking and raising her hand, she probably still does believe in ending fracking. I think she, after becoming president and seeing how difficult, or becoming vice president and negotiating and being the tie-breaking vote there, I think she's seen how difficult it is to actually get something like that done in the United States today. And it's good to hear that her position hasn't changed, that she knows that fracking is still incredibly dangerous for the communities that are nearby because of the exposure of chemicals that they have due to the process required to extract oil through fracking. I think it's good she recognizes that it needs to end and that there are better ways to get energy in the United States. I like that she has an economic plan that includes, initial government spending, fronting the capital necessary to transition to clean energy, because we know the private sector and the big oil companies we rely on energy today are not going to do it. I do really wish she gave a more clear answer on immigration there. I think that it was a non-answer. She could have just described that if we have more investment in processing migrants at the border, they wouldn't be incentivized to cross legally. It's still illegal to cross in certain areas, but by decriminalizing it, we're going to give a pathway to citizenship. We're going to have, more points where people can enter the United States legally, and the process can happen in a fast manner, and people aren't held in detention facilities. But it felt like she didn't want to speak to that, and I don't know why. I don't know why she's not giving more details in these answers, because she's going to need to. Because I don't think the American people like when politicians are vague. They want to know exactly what they're getting. And that response on Trump, I think it's good she's not touching the race or gender topic at all, because I think Trump kind of lost that on the onset by saying she changed her race to a room of Black journalists. I think he lost that argument before it began. I think she has no reason to engage on any of that. And I think it's good we're getting something different from Hillary there, because it's not really relatable to have this girl boss character always in a suit who's somehow playing up being a woman despite trying to hide her femininity and engage in the professional political world on masculine terms. I think what Kamala Harris is doing, there's viral videos of her cooking. She doesn't always wear a pantsuit. Sometimes she wears capes. I think she's changing the narrative without ever having to directly speak to it, and that's good.
I think you're right that her policy positions are vague, and I would argue that that's intentional, because she still does not have a full policy platform on her website, even though we were told that she was going to adopt the official DNC platform after the convention. And most of her policy changes, with the exception of the several that she sort of addressed, but not really in this interview, have come from either unnamed or communications level campaign officials. I mean, earlier this week, the campaign, through its director of rapid response, sent out an email accusing the Trump campaign of lying about Kamala Harris's position on electric vehicle mandates. And it was from Amar Musa, who said that it was a lie for them to say, quote, Vice President Harris wants to force every American to own an electric vehicle, and said that she does not support an electric vehicle mandate, except through the Inflation Reduction Act. Her and the Biden administration more generally wanted to introduce these new rules to the Environmental Protection Agency that would effectively force vehicle manufacturers to scale back gas-powered car production. And then when she was in the Senate in 2019, just a few months after she announced that she was going to run for president, she co-sponsored legislation that would force all car manufacturers to only sell zero-emissions vehicles, which at this point are 99% electric. There's some hydrogen-powered vehicles, but those are not very popular, by as early as 2035 or 2040. That is an electric vehicle mandate, and she still has not had to answer for that. And on the fracking question, I got the sense that this was more than just her recognizing that it's not a political reality to ban fracking, as in you can't get the Congress to vote for it. She outright said that she doesn't support banning fracking. Not, well, I don't think I could get it done anyway. And she also said that after voting after saying publicly that she would support banning fracking, which she did in a climate town hall during the primary process, she said, in 2020, I made my position on fracking clear, suggesting that she had changed in just that 1 year time frame. But she didn't make it clear in 2020. I went back and looked at the transcript of her time in the vice presidential debate, which is what she referenced against Mike Pence, and she only ever said, Joe Biden will not ban fracking, which was an acknowledgement that she was a part of an administration that had a different opinion on it than her. So again, there's still all of these misrepresentations of her record and no explanation as to how things have changed.
Yeah, I think, she explains how things have changed. She said, I still think banning fracking needs to happen, and it needs to happen in a slower way. I think pointing to
But
the
she didn't say
Inflation
that last
Reduction
night.
Act
She said she
and
doesn't
pointing
support
to
it.
the legislation that they've passed during the Biden administration around changing the economy, the CHIPS Act, and saying, this is how we can get things done. I think that's a very effective tool because this was passed in a bipartisan manner. It was very popular in Republican districts. They were bragging about, the new infrastructure that it got done. And so I think pointing to that's really effective because as someone who looks at the two people running, and I see oftentimes vague commitments from both of them, it's good to be able to point to something and say to the American people, we're going to do it like this successful implementation of public policy and government spending. Whereas Donald Trump, he says things like he wants large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips, but doesn't release a tax plan for how the taxes are going to change. He says things like, we're going to end inflation and make America affordable again. How are you going to do that? Because the taxes, or rather the increase on of tariffs is going to be inflationary. A 10% increase on tariffs is going to be translated into prices we're getting through our imports. And so he has a lot of vague plans as well. And when I look at the two, I'm getting more specifics as someone who studied data-driven policy from the Kamala Harris camp than from Donald Trump, who's been running. But the one thing that's lacking from both of them is a specific plan on Gaza. While Kamala Harris is being pretty specific around her economic plan and how she's going to get us from A to B, and we don't have that from Trump, we don't have it from either of them on the war on Gaza. And I think people need that before Election Day. A lot of people wanted us to get it from this Bash interview, and we're not.
Yeah, I agree that they both have been pretty vague on Gaza. I would disagree that the Trump platform is more vague than Kamala's, but I know we're out of time, but we're going to talk about this more, as well as the fact that Tim Walz was pressed about some of his misrepresentations of his record, as well as the media reaction to this interview. That's next here on Rising.